So I feel like a president's role in general, but also like at Barnard, is to sort of listen to what the students have to say and what they're looking for, what they believe, and sort of like take that information and like guide the school in a direction that is where the students want it to go. I think that like it would be great if we had a president who like reflected the beliefs of like the population at large, but I think more than anything their role is to just be like a conduit for what the students want and what the students believe.
I think a Barnard president has to really be present at Barnard and not be worrying about other people's opinions or other external factors, and that person's going to be really dedicated to the community.
It's more than just showing face, at events. It's like getting to know your students on personal level, getting to know our wants and needs. When we feel uncomfortable, we should be able to feel that we can come to you or have access to you. That's really important, and I think it builds trust. Oftentimes, like, you don't even have a level of trust between the leaders and the students because there's no actual community being built there. So how can I trust you in leading us?
Reflecting the ideals of students as much as possible, and being the person that's able to listen to a lot of diverse issues and concerns on campus and finding the best way to get results that help the student body as a whole. I hope that the president, or the role of the president, is definitely one that just doesn't make decisions up here, but like actually gets to listen to the students, and there's a clear link.
Barnard not only brings its focus back to students and their experiences on campus, and sort of more than acknowledging that they have concerns and have issues, addressing them and making clear action plans to address them, but also, just paying more attention to that and like building that as part of its community, not as sort of a reaction when everything happens, sort of building more preemptive plans.
Barnard, I felt pretty overwhelmed. I mean, I knew I was going to be surrounded by a lot of really intelligent and great people, but I came from like a working class background, and I already kind of had an inferiority complex, and I think that it would be good to have a president that embraces people's differences on this campus and actually like converses about that, rather than just being like, okay, well, you'll catch up, or like, oh, well, that's too bad, we're actually gonna try to push this agenda. Like actually recognizing that there are people that come from vastly different positions that are on this campus that need different things.
Barnard's history as a school that began as a way of addressing the needs of marginalized people. That's probably the most, or one of the most critical concerns that students feel and develop while they're students at Barnard. And I think in the past, some of the higher levels of administration have failed to understand that connection, or I've never really seen them make an effort to really understand that connection deeply. The only body on campus I can think of that kind of gets it, so to speak, from a student's perspective, is student life at Barnard. But otherwise, there's a lot of distance between what feels like what students value, especially in the way Barnard represents a microcosm of what's happening in American society today generally, and how we take all of those concerns very personally and as relevant. I'd like to see an administration, and particularly a president, who understands how our larger social concerns are also very relevant to us as students on campus. When there's an opportunity to speak out against a concern, I think the fact that Barnard claims to be a progressive space that has historically tried to represent or raise up marginalized voices means that we have a responsibility to continue behaving in that way. So for example, Columbia University recently, I think they filed an amicus brief against President Trump's Muslim ban, along with a lot of other Ivy League schools. Efforts like that, I think, send a very clear message about what a school values and whether they really value their own student body. I know that Wellesley College has usually been much faster than us, or more willing to mobilize quickly in order to express a message condemning condemning any kind of like institutionalized message of discrimination, or just like bias in general. I believe that Barnard should be at the forefront of these kinds of conversations.
A president should be very aware of diversity, especially as a minority. I think about diversity the most on this campus. And it doesn't mean that the president has to be of color, but just very aware of the different angles of privilege, the different angles of seclusion, of community, like how to build community. So yeah, that's something that's really important.
So one thing I would like to see our future president focus on is growing our endowment and funding programs like subsidized Metro cards for people who are working unpaid internships, and better housing and hopefully less expensive housing. But I would really love to see Barnard support low-income students, and I know even being a middle-class student, whatever your definition of that is, can be very difficult to afford in New York City.
Well, we care about, student workers' rights, like we said, contingent faculty. We care about diversity and having active spaces for everyone. So students of color, like specifically Black and Latinx students.
I mean, I think that obviously the labor rights movement has been really important. And I think that getting a president who understands that conversation will be really important. I don't think that I'm looking for a particular social rights background with the president, but I think someone who's more empathetic and really open to hearing all the voices of the students and the faculty.
I think it's time that Barnard has a woman of color as president. I think it's time that students of color at Barnard, particularly, I'll speak for myself, Black students, don't need to explain the importance for intersectionality, don't need to explain why the feminism which we uphold at Barnard right now is fractured and is not inclusive. I would love to see a figure who is the president of this college that represents me, not just visually, but with their life experiences and knowing what it's like to be marginalized and rising above that, not by leading in, but really by using the resources that you have to still survive and hopefully thrive in the current situation that we've been living in. I would like someone who actually exposes Barnard's history, the ways in which people have been oppressed in the making of Barnard, how some people have been disadvantaged. I would like to explore our history of slavery at Barnard, because that, I think, would help explain tensions between students of color and white students on campus, and white faculty and faculty of color on campus. Why is this important? Well, could you imagine where America would be today if we didn't know that slavery in this country existed? Would we have had the civil rights movement? Would Black people be seen as full citizens or almost close to full citizens? I think it's important that Barnard looks at its slave history so we can see how we're treating students of color on this campus and be active in the ways in which we address the issue of students of color feeling marginalized and they don't feel like they can own this space.
I definitely would prefer someone who doesn't view Barnard as a business, who doesn't view the collegiate experience as one that is, again, sort of a business-related one, an economic issue. I want someone who is empathetic, who chooses to engage with social issues and chooses to consider, again, what intersectionality means as a woman. So, again, it would be fantastic if we had a person of color be our president, but if not, to have a woman who purposely tries to understand various groups, tries to understand what it means to be a woman in a certain racial group, a woman who isn't straight, someone who also maybe is of, like, again, doesn't conform to typical gender molds, to have someone who really tries to understand the students as a whole.
I don't want our next president to be anti-labor, and I don't want our next president to be anti-student activist. Those are my two big ones, I would say.
I agree. I don't want a financier, someone who's on the board of Goldman Sachs. I don't want, I don't want someone who views student activism as ugly.
Or in opposition to what Barnard stands for.
Yeah. There you go.
And especially the union concerns, like the president needs to be an ambassador for both the faculty and the staff and work to make it equitable for everyone. Like, I can't believe that we're a feminist institution and we pay our women faculty, you know, not at a livable wage, you know.
I think that I'd like to see someone who's a little less related to the financial sector, and someone who's a little more in touch with the social justice aspects of a liberal arts education.
I don't want somebody with a finance background. I feel like I went to the listening session that they already had, and I feel like that was something that was echoed a lot. But it would be really cool to see a scholar and or scholar activist person be kind of voicing Barnard's concerns, especially in this moment historically, and in this city in particular. I don't want to see another person that cares more about Barnard's reputation as like an elite institution that sends a lot of kids to work at like Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan than actually pushing students to challenge themselves and think more critically about what our role is. I would say that raising money is important, but I would also say that doing more community-centric events, like expressing an interest in the faculty that are here, and maybe being like a scholar herself as president would be good, because there are a lot of faculty that are awesome that should have their voices lifted more often.
I believe really strongly in women's education and empowerment of women. I think that that's something that I've learned how to appreciate at Barnard. I'm really proud to be a student with my peers at Barnard. My peers make me really proud to be a Barnard student. And I think that I'm proud to be here kind of on the leading edge of education and rights. And I think that I want my next president to feel the same way.
The sense of pride in being a woman is one of the reasons why I chose Barnard, and I came here to learn how to be proud to be a woman and to have a community that is proud to love and appreciate womanhood.
Most certainly the student body. The fact that I am absolutely inspired by the people that are here every day, and I think the community of women here, there's just such a certain tone. There's a drive, there's an intention.
I think we need someone who's willing to actually invest in who we are as students and what's on our minds, and finds ways to interact with us and our concerns that feels real, that feels like they're not someone who just kind of is symbolic of our values, but actually believes in them as well.
I've been thinking a lot about the BCF campaign that just happened with the contingent faculty, and I would say that Maida is a leader on the campus. She's the president of UAW Local 2110, which represents the clerical workers and now the contingent faculty at Barnard, and she's been at Barnard for like 20 or 30 years, knows everybody that works here, is really great and smart and funny and enthusiastic about students and workers here. So
I want to see a president that shows up, that comes to meetings and rallies and protests. I want to see a president that shows up to productions that students produce. I want to see a president that's really involved in the fabric of the college and isn't someone who's kind of behind like a Wizard of Oz like curtain, essentially. I want to see someone who I pass in the hallway who says hi to me, who knows my name, who knows what I go through in the classroom and outside.